Kicking off the list at number 10, Krypto the Superdog. This good boy was actually the test pilot for the ship that carried baby Kal-El to Earth. He made his first appearance in Adventure Comics issue 210. Now, I know that he's not a super person, so I wanted to start this list off with him because animals are family. I'll argue that all day. Now, he wasn't supposed to be a recurring character, but he's a cute little dog. Who doesn't want to see him come back, right? So when Jor-El was testing this rocket, he strapped Krypto in for the ride, but the rocket was hit off course and it drifted into space for years. I can't imagine what that feels like in dog years. It's probably so bored. No kibbles and or bits. No kibbles or bits. He was so orbits. No kibbles or bits. Wow, we're writing jokes on the spot. This is crazy. Now, eventually that ship did land on Earth when Clark was a teenager. It's always fun getting a dog in your teen years, even if it's a dog from a doomed planet. That works too. His abilities were also super. They were just a little weaker because, he's a Labrador Retriever. Obviously. Number 9, Super Demon. Coming in hot from Earth 13, pun intended, Super Demon, aka Etrigan, came from the cursed planet of Camelot and crash landed to Earth. Now, of course, it was a magical version of Earth, because fun. Every day on Earth 13 has 13 hours and 13 months. Sounds honestly pretty unlucky, more than anything. His League of Shadows was a pretty stellar crew. We have Hellblazer, Anataz, Witchboy, Swamp Man, Fate, Ragman, Deadman, and Enchantress. Merlin, the magician, bound the demon to a guy named Jason Blood, who naturally was an expert in demonology. His last name's Blood. In Batman Superman issue 20, the duo have to face off against the demon Prince of Hell. Now, of course, accompanied by his super vampires. You gotta start part 3 off on a demonic note as well. Feels right. Number 8, Superman Red and Blue. This amazing story comes from issue 162 of Superman. It was an imaginary tale, so it was a one-off, but in it we see this Superman stressed out. His super duties were starting to pile up. He couldn't be everywhere at once, so he pulled a Santa Claus 2. The guy tried to enhance his intelligence with a machine, but ended up splitting himself into 2 parts. Now there's a red twin and a blue twin. They were the dream team. Together they created something called New Krypton. They enlarged Kandor on its surface, and they created a new underwater world for the citizens of Atlantis. So not only was the livelihood of Earth's population also increasing, but the love triangle that was happening in Superman's comics was also fixed. Super Blue asked Lana to marry him, while Super Red proposed to Lois. Lucy Lane even ends up with Jimmy Olsen. Now we have 3 weddings in 1. What a win. The issue ends asking readers which couple they think is happier. So what do you think? Comment down below. Just comment red or blue, it'll confuse everybody who's looking. And before we continue, if you want to just give this video a thumbs up as well, that would be pretty helpful. All you have to do is just do a little tap, a little... That's it, and then we all go home smiling. Isn't that wonderful? You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some crazy alternate Superman. Number 7, Eradicator. Created by writer Roger Stern and first appearing in Action Comics Annual 2, the Eradicator was this Kryptonian artifact over 200,000 years old. This dying alien race created these devices in order to preserve their culture. It's kind of like when we sent that spacecraft out and had like old music on. They're like, hey, whoever finds this is our culture. A group of aliens arrived to Krypton. A militarist faction led by Chem L killed them and then corrupted one of these devices to preserve his idea of Kryptonian culture. The Eradicator would simply eradicate alien influences after this point. He was a weapon that became sentient. That sounds bad already, but when you add in the fact that the Eradicator has most of Superman's powers, it gets even worse. The sentient Superman has these amazing abilities: super strength, speed, heat vision, flight, the whole package. Plus, he was originally a program from Krypton, so his history game is on point. He can also manipulate energy. He can absorb, convert, and then release energy from his hands or his eyes. So naturally, he has to wear a visor because his eyes are sensitive. It's a badass visor. It's not like a Dairy Queen, it's a good one. Number 6, Kal. What if Krypton was destroyed much sooner than it really was? What if Kal-El was sent to Earth during, say, the medieval ages? Superman Kal was written by Dave Gibbons, released in 1995, and in this reality, Kal-El became a blacksmith after crash landing. A friend saw his strength and was like, oh, you should for sure be a blacksmith. You can definitely make swords, with your hands. Go and do that right now. Personally, I would have suggested jousting, but blacksmiths are still cool. They're fine. He met Lois in this reality as well, and in this case she was Lady Lois, daughter of Baron Luthor. Uh-oh. So Kal's ship was found by Baron Luthor, and his first idea was to make a suit of armor out of the metal, like medieval knight's armor. So he got Kal-El the blacksmith to do so, but the bargain was that Kal-El can take Lady Lois's hand in marriage. So they get married, but after the ceremony, Luthor's like, oh, new rule, you actually can't sleep with somebody until after their wedding night. Sorry. So Kal was upset that night. He slept alone. He was crying into his pillows, listening to Careless Whisper, and then come morning time, he heard that Luthor had actually killed Lady Lois. No more wife. He had a wife for like 6 hours and then no more wife. Evil. Putting the evil in medieval, I see. So Kal grabbed a sword after, making it with his hands or whatever, marched up to Luthor's castle and fought him naked. Yeah, Luthor tried to burn him with oil, but he's the Man of Steel, so his clothes just got burnt. So now he was naked and fighting. How amazing is that? Luthor ends up stabbing Kal with the kryptonite gemstone, and Kal stabs Luthor with his sword. Everybody wins. Or rather, everybody loses in this case.
Number 5. Super Doom. After a trip to Tibet, Clark, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen built a machine that used vibrations to bring thoughts into reality, and the best possible use for it in their eyes was to create a Superman that was a thought-powered redeemer capable of saving the world. Unfortunately, they ended up having to sell the machine to Overcorp, and Overcorp took their Superman idea and twisted it so much that the brutal and toxic Super Doom was born. A self-described killer franchise, Super Doom wasted no time in becoming the preeminent superhuman of its world, and sought out to eliminate any form of competition, meaning he was on the hunt for other Supermen. After ravaging countless parallel planets and butchering numerous Superman and Superman-like adjacent people, it finally tracked down its creators to Earth 23, where it killed Jimmy and mortally wounded Clark. Later, Super Doom was summoned to Prime Earth by an unwilling Lex Luthor as a final doomsday weapon against Superman, and after a brutal struggle, Superman overcame the monster, which, upon defeat, transformed into a bomb that Superman managed to place on the dark side of the moon before detonation, seemingly annihilating Super Doom once and for all. Give the story a read for yourself, starting with 2012's Action Comics Volume 2, number 9. Number 4. Superman Earth 1198. In Superman the Dark Side, the baby Kal-El ship is diverted on its path to Earth and instead lands on the planet Apokolips, home of the Overlord Darkseid. In this version of Superman, Darkseid is the one to raise him, and Superman becomes his loyal and devoted disciple and helps him in the destruction of New Genesis. As well as this, Superman doesn't grow up to wear tights and a cape. Instead, he opts for a menacing black and red armor with a lightning bolt S across his chest. Not only is this Superman powerful, evil, and terrifying, he also has a thing for weapons, using the Apocalyptian sword and Omega Warhead, as well as anything he can get his hands on. Superman in this story is more of a pawn for Darkseid than inherently evil, but much like the others, his actions have horrific consequences. With his direct and indirect help, Darkseid managed to extract the anti-life equation from Superman's cells and subjugated the world and expanded his reach. With Earth by his side and a yellow sun to power him up, Superman was forced to fight Darkseid to end his reign of terror. Highly recommend you check out this 3-issue run for yourself, starting with 1998 Superman Darkseid number 1. Number 3. Cyborg Superman. Now, there have been 2 major characters that have become Cyborg Superman. The first and most famous is the astronaut Hank Henshaw. When a solar flare hit Henshaw's spacecraft during a space experiment, he and his crew started to mutate. The mutation was so strong that once back on Earth, Henshaw's crew, along with his wife, all committed suicide. Before Henshaw's body disintegrates from the solar flare, he is able to upload his mind using NASA equipment. With the help of the birthing matrix that was used to send Superman to Earth, Henshaw creates a cyborg body with all the powers that Superman has. After this, Henshaw finds out that Superman had thrown the Eradicator into the sun, which caused the original solar flare. Blaming Superman for everything, the newly formed Cyborg Superman seeks revenge on the Man of Steel. To destroy the real Superman's reputation, Cyborg Superman tried to use a nuclear bomb to destroy Metropolis. He was defeated because that's what happens when you go up against Superman, but used his powers to inhabit machines to return over and over and over again, once even conquering most of the planet Apokolips. After his ultimate defeat, he was taken in by Sinestro during the Sinestro Corps War, making him even more powerful than ever. Since the New 52 era, Cyborg Superman has been revamped as having been the father of Supergirl, Zor-El, who survived Krypton's destruction only to have been transformed into the villain he is today. Why not give Hank's story a read for yourself, starting with 1990's Adventures of Superman number 466. Number 2. Lord Superman. This alternate Superman doesn't have any roots with comics. He is actually from the Justice League TV series, specifically 2003's episode A Better World, and is one of the first Dark Superman that we've seen in the animated universe. This Superman lost his way in battle with President Lex Luthor after Luthor executed the Flash in front of him, and mocked the Man of Steel for never being able to see things through to their logical conclusion. Superman, overcome with rage, executed Luthor with his heat vision, took over the world with his Justice League's help, and formed the Justice Lord's crime-free regiment. They saw themselves as the world's saviors, saviors, and the Terror was a small price to pay to realize their vision. Of course, when they found an alternate Earth, they immediately imagined all the quote-unquote good they could have done there, and Lord Superman's incredible powers would have let him succeed on this new Earth if it weren't for the regular Superman, who managed to defeat the Justice Lord before it was too late. I think the worst thing about Justice Lord Superman is that he truly thought he was doing the right thing, but we all know for a fact that he wasn't. Check out this 2-part episode for yourself and let me know what you think in the comments below. And finally, number 1, Injustice Superman. Before I dive more into this one, I have to say that I love the Injustice games so much. I remember when I first got the game and I did not put it down until I was finished with the story, so comment below who your go-to character is. In Injustice 1, I'd have to say mine is either Nightwing or Batman, but in Injustice 2, it has to be Green Arrow or Scarecrow. Anyways, sorry about that, let's talk about Injustice Superman. In a storyline amalgamated from diverse comic plots along with the Justice League animated 2-parter, A Better World, that I just talked about, the Joker sadistically fear-gasses Superman into killing Lois Lane. Superman responds by putting his open hand straight through the clown's chest and turns the world into a dictatorship-like police state. In the process, he doxes Batman, murders Shazam and Martian Manhunter, converts the Justice League into his personal secret police, and gets his butt kicked by Alfred Pennyworth. He's finally defeated by a still good Superman from another universe who encases him in a red sunlight generating capsule. Now, there have been a few storylines over the years that have revolved around the idea of what would happen if Superman went bad and whether anyone could stop him, and this just proves that the only man who can take down Superman is Superman himself. Why not play the games again for yourself to refresh your memory, or check out 2013's Injustice Gods Among Us #1.
Kicking off the list at number 10, The Nail. Created by Alan Davis, this version of Superman is Amish. Hot start, that's right. After he survived the destruction of Krypton, baby Kal-El was then sent to Earth in order to survive. The origin story for Superman gets a little strange when Martha and John Kent got a flat tire before departing for Smallville that day, hence the name The Nail. Now we're putting it together, there we go. So the lovebirds end up staying in for the night. Martha says she's in the mood just to stay home and John agrees. So now instead the super infant was found by an Amish couple. Now he's raised a good lad, but he's disconnected from the world. He's churning butter, not checking Twitter. He has no clue he's a Kryptonian. So in turn, we get to see a Justice League with no Superman, and the world is a hot mess. Lex salvaged Kal-El's spaceship after he landed, so he used that tech to create an evil version of Jimmy Olsen. But when Super Jimmy is fighting the Justice League, the fight moves to Amish Kal-El's backyard, and that's when he discovers his true powers. He always had a feeling he was superpowered, he just didn't really know. So he bids farewell to his Amish folks, and then he unleashes the power of a god. What a day. Number 9, Injustice Superman. This comic run began back in 2013. Injustice Gods Among Us issue 1. Brought to us from the minds of Tom Taylor and Jeremy Rapak, comes this dark alternate reality where Lois Lane was kidnapped by the Joker. So he goes on this hunt with the help of the Justice League, tearing submarines apart, looking for his love, but as issue 4 begins, so do the streams of our tears. Lois Lane gets killed, and in turn, Superman goes bat insane. He couldn't even stick around. He gave the body to Wonder Woman and then shoom, he just flew off. Green Lantern tried to talk to him a little bit, saying, you know, you're hurt, you're angry, yada yada yada, just slow down. But Superman wasn't having it. He had something better on his mind. Batman's face says it all during this scene. Superman tells Batman during his dark ruling days that he learned the idea of enforcing peace through fear from Batman himself. I see no lie here. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be super helpful for us at Top 10 Nerd. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's not waste any time and get you right back into this list. Number 8, Kingdom Come Superman. Shifting over to an alternate reality with an older Justice League, this Superman isn't as ruthless, but take that with a grain of salt. Kal-El of Earth 22 made his first punch into DC Comics with Kingdom Come issue 1. Now this is a version where Lois Lane still did perish, only before her untimely demise she made Superman promise to her that he would not kill the Joker in retaliation, so a little bit different this time. So he followed through and simply had the clown arrested. But this new superhero named Magog made their debut, and then they in turn ended up killing the Joker. Magog was obviously put on trial because, you know, killing's bad and all that stuff, but he was acquitted. The general public was like, oh, the Joker? Yeah, that guy was horrible. Thanks, great work. I could take the bus without having a panic attack now. Lovely, sounds wonderful, keep it up. Superman had to then rethink a lot after this. I mean, the public is now okay with killing villains. What does this world even come to? He's been letting these guys live, and in turn they've broken free over and over again, and then continued killing innocents over and over again. So he then just disappears to the Fortress of Solitude for a bit, observing without intervening. Now he did return less than a decade later, but the world had fallen into a societal depression. So with a new suit, older Clark Kent returned to the League, ready to once again enforce a code of ethics. Number 7. Calvin Ellis. When a comic book hints at a past president of the United States, it's usually pretty comical. For example, in Harley Quinn and her Gang of Harleys issue 5, we meet Harley Sin, and her father looks and acts a little bit like Donald Trump. It's a ride. Now Calvin Ellis, on the other hand, was written by Grant Morrison to be based off Barack Obama and Muhammad Ali. So a much better person and role model, I'd say, just right off the bat. Earth 23 Superman President Ellis made his first appearance in DC Comics with Final Crisis issue 7. Kal-El was raised by the Ellis family, teaching him to always stand up for himself no matter what, and to fight for what he believes in no matter what bullies stand in your way. Little more optimistic and useful than the Amish family, I'd say, just a tad. Can I churn butter? Or can I like save people? No? Just churning butter? Alright, great. Number 6, Ultraman. Coming from Earth 3, originally Earth 2 in the comics, Ultraman is the evil version of Superman. Always fun, even if it's dark. Appropriately named Clark Luthor, he gets more power the more kryptonite he's exposed to. So if you see him dipping some crystals and licking them, you know, you gotta hit the deck. And the design is pretty much the same, only instead of a hopeful S on his chest, Ultraman rocks a U. The angrier Ultraman gets, the stronger he also gets. So usually a play on opposites are fun in comics. This one's just borderline terrifying.
Number 5. Injustice Superman. The Superman of the Injustice universe has pretty much the same history as the baseline Superman. But when the Joker kidnaps the pregnant Lois Lane, it lures Superman into a trap of fear gas. In his poisoned state, Superman hallucinates his true love as the villain Doomsday and instantly attacks, flying Lois and his unborn child into space, killing them, and inadvertently causing a nuclear bomb to destroy his city, Metropolis. After suddenly losing his city, wife, and baby, Superman goes into an honestly understandable rage, bursting into the interrogation room where Batman is learning the true intentions of the Joker and plunges his super fist right through the guy's chest. Following these events, Superman takes control of the Earth and rules it as a tyrant. Fortunately, Batman forms an insurgency to try and beat this corrupted Superman, eventually enlisting the aid of another Earth's Justice League, and I guess technically whoever plays the tied-in video game, to defeat him and save the day. Number 4. Brutal. Brutal is a cloned version of Superman, but unlike a certain bizarre version of Superman, who we will talk about later, don't worry, this duplication was done by none other than Darkseid himself. He raised the resulting clone into a soldier, nay, a weapon, and unleashed him on the superheroes of Earth 2, along with Steppenwolf and the other Hunger Dogs, but they don't really matter. When Steppenwolf tried to subvert his master Darkseid and take Earth as his own, brutally murders him with his heat vision, establishing his devotion to his Lord Darkseid. Let me make my intentions clear. Hail Darkseid! Which is just a sweet line after you murdered a general of Darkseid. The Earth became lost to Darkseid's minions, and eventually, after a lot of other stuff, Kal-Zod, Earth 2's Superman, faced Brutal in combat, and after a furious battle, showed that Brutal was just an imitation, and a cheap one at that, as his body began to deteriorate, and the day was saved. Again. Hey guys, just wanted to say a quick thanks for watching. We hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, why not head on over to that pretty little subscribe button and give us a follow and a like. You guys are the reason we can even be here in the first place. Love you! Okay, on to the top 3. Number 3. Super Doom. On Earth 45, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Clark Kent are scientists instead of reporters, and they use their smarts to build a machine that can turn thoughts into reality, which, I mean, how the heck did they think that was a good idea? I can think of 10 things right now that should never become reality. Anyways, using the aforementioned thought-to-form machine, they try to create a being called Superman, who would be capable of doing amazing things and who could save worlds. But when they are forced to sell their idea to Overcorp, they decide to rebrand and end up creating a monstrosity. Superman, the Last Night of Tomorrow. Or Super Doom. With a corporate fueled agenda of destroying all competition, Super Doom quickly becomes the strongest super being on its own planet, and then enters the bleed space to murder all other versions of Superman. Of course, bad guys never win forever, so after defeating and devouring multiple different Supermen of multiple different Earths, he was stopped by the Superman and Lex Luthor of Earth 22, who stranded him between universes. He's since been used in a few other storylines and remains one of the most formidable evil versions of Superman to this day. I mean, he didn't even die. Number 2. Bizarro. When Lex Luthor gets the plans for a device called the Duplicator Ray, he modifies the device and uses it to try and create a clone of Superman, who will follow his every order without question. But since our Lex can't seem to do anything right, the resulting doppelganger is an unintelligent, unpredictable, backwards version of Superman, eventually known as Bizarro. Bizarro is a main villain for Superman, appearing in many stories, and I'm so glad because, gosh, he's just so fun to see! Eventually, Bizarro gets a case of the blues and longs for love, and gets the hots for Lois Lane. Lois isn't really interested, but being the great gal that she is, she uses the Duplicator Ray on herself, creating a Bizarro Lois Lane. And the two eventually leave Earth to settle another Earth-like planet they fittingly name Bizarro World. Or, and forgive me here, Hetre, which is Earth backwards, which they populate with more and more duplicates of themselves. But don't worry! They have pretty rock necklaces that say Bizarro and Bizarro Lois 1, so we don't get confused. Number 1. Ultraman. In the universe of Earth 3, things are a little turned upside down. Instead of being driven by the morals of good versus evil, the people of this universe are inspired by strength above all else. I can't really relate. Born on a dying Krypton where Kryptonians evolved to be empowered by green kryptonite to a maniacal version of Jor-El aptly named Jor-Il, baby Kal-El is jettisoned off to Earth. But instead of the classic morals, he's instead inspired by his father to become the strongest possible being with absolutely no weaknesses in himself and the others around him. When Kal lands on the farm of Johnny and Martha Kent, he uses pieces of green kryptonite to empower himself and forces the dysfunctional couple to be his parents until the totally mature age of 7, when he murders them both and sets the farm ablaze. Eventually, this self-proclaimed Ultraman murders the President of the United States of America and takes control of the world, creating the Crime Syndicate of America with other evil alternate versions of classic characters, including an evil Wonder Woman, Superwoman, and evil version of Batman, Owlman, who have a pretty toxic love triangle.
And at 10, Tangent. The Superman of Earth Tangent was originally a human named Harvey Dent, who gained superpowers through a freak accident. He became one of the top superheroes, however, after defeating Ultra Humanite, who on this Earth was created by a US government super soldier project. He became too powerful to be controlled and then threatened to destroy the world. Yeah. But after the death of Superman's wife, he became dark and vengeful, taking over the world. While he protected the world from crime, he was still tyrannical, not allowing any freedom of thought. And this is where the story of Tangent Superman's reign begins. I don't know why Superman is so codependent on Lois, or whoever his wife ends up being, cause like, whenever he loses his wife, he ends up going berserk. Like bro, you literally just like, you lost your whole planet. I think like one death, even if it is the love of your life, isn't gonna be that much. I mean, this version didn't lose his home planet, but like, still. Other versions in this list, you get it. And at 9, Subject B-Zero. Subject B-Zero, also known as the Monster, was a creation of Lex Luthor, presumably used to combat Superman, but was taken out of stasis early to help combat Ultraman and the Crime Syndicate. Despite being the creation of Luthor, B-Zero had a gentle heart and simply wished to enjoy the beauty of life and to make his father proud. Although imbued with Kryptonian-like powers, B-Zero was easily overpowered and killed by Ultraman, much to the grief of his father, who actually grew to love him. So while not an evil version of Superman, you have to admit, if this guy was running at you, you'd be pretty damn terrified. Like bro, get some skin cream, some moisturizer. You look like a rock gnome named Deborah Mustard, come on. Next thing you know, you're gonna try to control me with one word and then make me a little robot trinket that's gonna get stolen by a goblin who only wants to eat pigeons. And look, you may not understand that reference, but if you do, we're friends now, okay? And at 8, Bizarro. The original Bizarro was created when Superman was exposed to a duplicate ray, in accordance with the science fiction concepts of Superman's stories of the there was a lot of sci-fi going on with Superman. However, Bizarro relocated to the Bizarro World, a cuboidal planet called Hetre, which is just Earth backwards, don't really know how to pronounce it, but it operated under Bizarro logic. So like, it was a crime to do anything good, and basically since Bizarro was the invert of Superman, that Earth was also populated by inverts of other DC characters. The 1986 event Crisis on Infinite Earths though rewrote DC's continuity, eliminating that Earth. Since then, 2 different Bizarro characters have appeared. One of them was a flawed clone created by Lex Luthor, and the second, the longer lasting Bizarro, was an idea of the Batman villain the Joker, brought to life by the cosmic trickster Mr. Mitzi's-Pitalik. He was first introduced in Superboy number 68 from 1958 though, and is even one of the coolest Superman versions there is, even if he's not always like actually Superman and rather like an experiment, but like, whatever. And it's 7, Justice Lord. For much of his life, Justice Lord's Superman background matched the Justice League counterpart, until President Lex Luthor executed the Flash. Soon after that, Superman stormed the White House, while his comrades battled the Secret Service. And as they were doing that, Superman confronted President Luthor in the Oval Office. Despite Superman's accusations of corruption and abuse of power, Luthor refused to surrender and arrogantly stated that he would find a way to get out of prison. Or at least avoid being prosecuted to begin with. Superman declared that if being a hero meant that this feuding and fighting had to continue, then he was done with it, and then used his heat vision to execute the president on the spot, Shazam style. After President Luthor's assassination, the Justice Lords spent the next 2 years imposing their brand of peace on the Earth through harsh rule. Justice Lord Superman himself continued to use his heat vision to lobotomize all of Earth's criminals and supervillains. As a result, all of them became harmless, walking vegetables who obediently inhabited the world's prisons. Which, I mean, like, is a little tamer than some versions of Superman. Like, lobotomy or death. Honestly, I don't know which would be considered more evil. And at 6, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies. Except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. When trying to attack the Joker, however, Joker just turns around and cracks her right in the skull. Superman returns as Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. And as for the Joker, he arrives for his trial, but he's killed by a new superhero going by Magog. However, Magog ends up getting acquitted of his charges after killing the Joker, which honestly, I understand, but Superman is appalled by the public embracing a killer as a hero. Already disheartened at the death of Lois, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to his Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns and reforms the Justice League, though, with the goal of capturing heroes who took Magog's example and started killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes, a la Invasion, the CW crossover. But in the end, Superman does end up dating Wonder Woman, and they end up expecting a child. I mean, like, it took you a while, but you got over it. Attaboy.
Number 5. Justice Lord. Coming from the animated universe, 2003 Justice League episode titled A Better World showed us one that's rather darker. This parallel universe showed Kal-El and the Justice Lord storming the White House. President Lex Luthor had just executed the Flash, and the team wasn't too happy about it. So Batman and Wonder Woman fought off the Secret Service while Superman tells Luthor that he's taking him in. Now Lex is obviously insane, so he has a button that can just start a nuclear war if pressed. One of those easy buttons, just, you know, a nightmare. Now he's threatening Superman, saying that he needs to use deadly force if he wants to save the people, so Superman does. His eyes glow red, and when Batman and Wonder Woman come back in, it's too late. They can smell his corpse. It's really gross. Superman, though, he was all smiles. This was just the start. Now it cuts to a couple years after this point, and the Justice Lords were ruling the Earth. And of course, freedom was not included. Number 4. Composite Superman. Joseph Meach made his first appearance in World's Finest issue 142. He was a diver struggling to get by, so he put on this sidewalk diving show. You know, those sidewalk diving shows we always come across. He jumped from a high building into this water tank, but the water, unbeknownst to him, was actually leaking out. So when he went to jump, he almost landed in a practically empty tank, but Superman thankfully saved his life. Now on top of that, Superman even gave this guy a job. He employed him as a custodian at the Superman Museum. So Joseph was pretty bitter after this point. He had his own misfortunes, plus he's now shining Superman's cape all day. I get it, but when a lightning bolt hit the statue of the Legion of Superheroes, Joseph got all of their power somehow. So he used this new shape-shifting power look to look both like Batman and Superman, going by the Composite Superman. So Meach would plan these situations for Batman and Superman to show up and save the day, but they were rigged to make these heroes look stupid. His powers were impressive, but not permanent. He reverted back to human form one day with no recollection of what he had done. Number 3. Cyborg Superman. Hank Henshaw made his first appearance in Adventures of Superman issue 465. He was a scientist, astronaut, and team leader of the Excalibur crew. He was joined on this LexCorp space mission by his wife and 2 others. A lot of Fantastic Four vibes going on here, that's for sure. In fact, after the cosmic rays got to the crew, the powers were actually quite similar. Terry, Hank's wife, was essentially the Invisible Woman, whereas Hank, his face started to melt off. It actually ended horribly for everybody but Terry. Now Superman saved her, the others it was too late, but in Adventures of Superman issue 468 it was revealed that Hank lived through iCloud. Yeah, basically he transferred all of his consciousness to LexCorp's mainframe, and then he took over NASA's equipment, and then he beamed his mind into the birthing matrix, the pod that carried Superman from Krypton. So now he was able to travel the cosmos and learn about other local life forms and their history. And he eventually came to the conclusion that Superman was evil and needed to be stopped. So he recruited Mongol and planned his revenge, but after Superman died battling Doomsday, Hank claimed to be the Superman reborn. Not a bad plan. So far he's killing it. Number 2, Super Doom. Coming from Earth 45, this Superman was also a project gone wrong. He first appeared in Action Comics Volume 2, Issue 9 when Jimmy Olsen created a machine that could turn thoughts into reality. So the gang decided to make a robot Superman. What could go wrong, I wonder? They ended up selling this device to Overcorp, which made it into a Superman the Last Night of Tomorrow, aka the monstrous Super Doom. Now Overcorp used him to take over the planet, obviously, but that still wasn't enough. Super Doom entered the bleed space and searched the multiverse for his creators, destroying planets and other versions of Superman, like Optiman of Earth 36 and Superman of Earth 42, but eventually it came to Earth 23 and had to go against their Superman, Calvin Harris, aka the Superman President. And if you want to know more about the President Superman, check out part 1 of this list after you're done, if you haven't done so already. And finally, number 1. Darkseid Superman. In Superman Darkseid issue 1 released back in the late 90s, we see an alternate life for Kal-El when Metron intercepts his escape pod and gives the Kryptonian to Darkseid instead. There you go, enjoy. Now it doesn't take long for Superman to then become the champion of Apocalypse. His name was instantly heard across the planet. This guy wore dark armor, he was way more brutal when it came to combat, and when he led the battle against New Genesis, he destroyed the home of the New Gods. And as the planet died, the High Father told him the truth about his origins and his true prophecy, so he was then sent to Earth, where he almost drowned because he was wearing all that badass armor, but luckily he was saved by a woman named Lane. Brutal origin story, but we got where we needed to be eventually.
Number 10, Red Sun Superman. Answer me this, have you ever wondered what would happen if Superman didn't have that good and wholesome upbringing and was raised somewhere else? Like, I don't know, let's say the Soviet Union? Well, wonder no longer, because that is exactly what happens in the comic book miniseries Superman Red Sun. Instead of his ship crash landing in Kansas, Superman lands in the Ukraine in the middle of the Cold War. In the story, Superman is raised with the ideals that the Soviet Union instills in him, and the world feels a sense of fear as a superpowered alien is the Soviets' new secret weapon. He still has all the powers you associate with Superman because he is still exposed to the yellow sun. With the passion and sense of justice we've come to expect from Superman, Soviet Superman was so dedicated to his country, which made him incredibly dangerous for the wrong reasons, because he was a living weapon that the Soviets used to spread their power throughout the globe. Over the course of about 20 years, he traveled the world with Wonder Woman, converting other nations and even becoming their new leader. He was a good leader, don't get me wrong, because he is still Superman, it was just for a very bad world. Highly recommend you check out this alternate Superman for yourself, starting with 2003's Superman Red Sun Volume 1, Number 1. Number 9, Ultraman. Similar to our Superman's origin story, this iteration was sent from the planet Krypton to Earth 3. However, it's not really stated why, since Krypton didn't explode in this universe. On his way to Earth 3, he first came into contact with kryptonite, which started the change in his body that turned him into the superpowered powerhouse that we know. And since then, every time he came in contact with kryptonite, he only grew stronger. After becoming an adult, he renamed himself Ultraman, and this is where he vastly differs from our Superman because he became a brutal authoritarian and ruthlessly rules his version of the Justice League called the Crime Syndicate, conquering most of the world with their help. After largely conquering most of the world, Ultraman developed a new type of supervision that allowed him to see into the Earth 1 dimension. Seeking an open battle to test their powers after defeating the military forces of their native Earth 3, the Crime Syndicate challenged the combined forces of the Earth 1 Justice League of America and Earth 2 Justice Society of America. Not able to withstand the combined might of two Earth's greatest super beings, the Crime Syndicate was defeated and imprisoned in an extra-dimensional bubble created by the Earth 1 Green Lantern. Ultraman is a perfect example of someone who has all the power but isn't happy. Hailing from an Earth where evil always wins, Ultraman is always looking for something new to conquer, torment, or honestly both. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance all the way back in 1964's Justice League of America number 29. Number 8, Overman. Hailing from Earth 10, a universe where the Germans won World War II, we have Overman, the leader of the new Reichman and the Superman of this Earth. Kal-El was sent to Earth 10 as a baby in a ship away from the planet Krypton because it was dying. Pretty standard Superman origin, however, much like the Red Sun Superman, he was raised by the wrong people. Alongside the German forces, Overman conquered the world in, I want to say, less than 20 years, after which he decided to leave the Earth for a while. 3 years later, he returned with a clear head and saw all the damage he helped cause and became an advocate against all of what he once stood for. War, while still working alongside them for some reason. Eventually, German scientists used Kal's cells to create a clone of him known as Overgirl that Overman learned to love like family. However, she died not too long after her creation, and that hit him hard. Inconsolable and grief-stricken, Overman leaked some precious information to the freedom fighters that resulted in the demise of the new Reichman and Metropolis. Check out probably one of the saddest Superman stories I've ever heard of, starting with 2015's The Multiversity Guidebook number 1. Number 7. The Eradicator. Existing on New Earth, the Eradicator was an ancient Kryptonian weapon merged with a human body to form the last son of Krypton, an extreme vigilante who surfaced after the death of Superman. The Eradicator was given to Superman while on Warworld, and it began its work again on Earth, creating the Fortress of Solitude and trying to manipulate Superman into becoming the ideal Kryptonian. When it failed, the Eradicator created a new body for itself based on Superman. The Eradicator had all of Superman's memories, even though it wasn't actually the real Superman, but was far more brutal and violent. It didn't actually have the power to absorb solar radiation, so it relied on Superman's body to transfer energy to it. Over the years, it became more compassionate and even fought alongside Superman in a few fights, the most notable being their fight against Cyborg Superman, and even sacrificed itself to save Earth, but it always remained dedicated to preserving Superman and Kryptonian life. In DC's Rebirth continuity, the Eradicator has returned and it's just as dangerous as ever, so why not take a look at the Superman clone story for yourself, starting with their first appearance in 1989's Action Comics Annual number 2 all the way to 2011's Action Comics number 901. Number 6. Black Zero. This is actually the third Black Zero. This was an alternate version of Superboy known as Superman 2 from a hyper time stream in which Superman had not returned to life and his clone had been left to fully mature and develop his full Kryptonian powers in addition to some tactile telekinesis. With this new power, he could create a field around himself that made him invulnerable, allowed him to fly, and also move heavy objects, similar to Superman's strength. Superman 2 tried to fight crime, but ended up losing a battle that cost its life, leading to a backlash against human cloning. He decided to rename himself after the pro-cloning organization on Krypton, Black Zero, and fight for clone rights. He used Project Cadmus to kill off most of the world's superheroes and recreated most of them as clones of the originals, but that wasn't enough for him. He entered Hypertime, a cross between a time stream and the multiverse during an era where DC Comics only consisted of one universe, to travel to other realities to fight for clone rights as well. Black Zero was a fanatical and ruthless warrior who was eventually and thankfully stopped by the combined strength of numerous Superboys from across Hypertime. Appearing across only a few issues, this is a short story that is definitely worth a read, so if you feel like it, check out 1999 Superboy Volume 4 number 61 to 64.
Number 5. Centaur Superman. Superman Wonder Woman, Whom Gods Destroy, was an issue released back in 1996, and it's a 4-part Elseworlds miniseries that shows us a world where the Germans ended up winning World War II. It's an odd future, to say the least. Bruce Wayne is now the president, and once Cersei sends out her squad to kidnap Lana Lang, Clark and Lois then have to fly to Europe to save her. Clark didn't even use his powers either, he just booked a normal human Southwest flight. Gotta ride in style, I guess, no matter what the odds are. So during this flight, however, trouble came back around for them and the plane went down over Germany. The goddess Athena then turned Lois into Wonder Woman, where she would then go toe-to-toe with the Diana Wonder Woman, who in this story was on the bad side. And as for Clark, when the plane went down, Cersei turned him into a centaur. Just a handsome half-man, half-horse, noble steed. Now of course, looking the way he did, all these other ladies, centaur ladies, were racing over to meet this dashing man. After they all introduced themselves to each other and shake hoofs, all that good stuff, they would then just raid towns and party hard. This is a horrible time for Lois, like she's fighting for her life, and Clark is just prancing around like he's on season 7 of Bachelor in Paradise. He's loving this. Number 4. Super Menace. Coming from Superman issue 137 titled The Super Brat from Krypton, surprise, Kal-El has a clone. So when Jor-El shot Kal-El into space after the destruction of Krypton, that ship ended up hitting a derelict space satellite and then he was duplicated. So the one craft was found by criminals named Derek and Bonnie, and they see this as a golden opportunity to raise another super sidekick, especially one with all the abilities that Clark has. Later on, a kryptonite meteor crashes into Earth and the criminal couple realizes that it doesn't affect the young clone. He grows up in secret, waiting to make his grand entrance as the Super Menace. First things first, let's take care of that other guy though, shall we? He fights the Superman, they fight, and when Superman uses his X-ray vision, he notices something is odd about his foe. And then suddenly, Super Menace makes it rain kryptonite meteors. This of course almost kills Superman until Super Menace decides, you know what, I don't want to be a Super Menace anymore. We love a good change of heart. He saves Superman, he handles his criminal parents, and then he flies off to return back to his natural state of energy and becomes one with the universe. Number 3. Karkgan the Mighty. Coming from Superboy issue 183, Karkgan was raised by gorillas, Karkgan being Kal-El. His ship ended up landing in the jungles of Africa, and he realized that he's different from the others after he learns how to fly. It's basically Tarzan if he was Superman, hence why his name is a combination of both. This version is quite super, literally. I mean, when he's not swinging through vines and hucking his own poop at people, he's saving hundreds of animals from floods. How lovely. Even if it means carrying them by their ears, whatever it takes. He does try his luck in the big city though afterwards, but obviously being raised by gorillas, he had a tough time fitting in. Honestly, good. Fitting in is overrated anyways. If you want to do backflips in the jungle, just go for it. Number 2. Bizarro Superman. First appearing in Superboy issue 68, Bizarro Superman is, as his name suggests, bizarre. He's a man of steel but with the opposite intentions, and his powers are also opposites. Instead of breathing icy cold dad breath, he can now breathe fire, like a dragon. Now he has laser ice eyes too, it's pretty fun. The interactions with Superboy are fun. Bizarro Superman throws Clark across the deck of a pool, and he has to like fly his way casually and steer into the pool to blend in. It's honestly trouble. It's kind of like the Iron Giant, but like crazier? The new 52 version of Bizarro was created when Lex Luthor tried to clone Superman, and instead of waiting 10 years for the project to be completed, Lex released him after 5 years, so in turn now he has his pale, but still jacked look. We love Bizarro Superman, honestly. He's like a Frankenstein that can bench press 1,000 pounds. It's pretty fun. And finally, number 1. Lex L. Appearing only in Superman issues 230 and 231, we find Lex L born on the planet Krypton instead of Clark. So Superman, but bald. Super Caillou, basically. His hair loss at such a young age is actually explained in the comic because when he was really young, Lex L's father, Jor-El, held his head next to kryptonite as a punishment. So it's actually pretty tragic. When Lex and his father did crash land on Earth after fleeing their doomed planet, the rocket distracted Martha and Jonathan Kent, who were bank robbers in the story, and they couldn't see, so they ended up crashing. So that's Clark's life here. His parents died in that crash, and Lex L grew up to become Superman. It's a fun one-off story. We get to see Clark take out Jor-El and then go on a crime spree. Just a total flip in characteristics. Also, bonus points for Lex wearing a wig on his off time to hide his secret identity. Way more committed to the cause than Clark and his normal reading glasses.
Number 10. Dark Multiverse Superman. Now, I don't know if this is laziness, but the Dark Universe version of Superman doesn't really get much justification as to why his mind snapped and he killed millions of people, his own family, and most of the other superheroes. The Batman of this universe, after seeing this Superman kill his own wife, and after he cuts off Batman's arm, decides that this guy just ain't it. And he transformed himself into a doomsday Batman hybrid called the Devastator, and smashed down this Superman, poisoned him, and impaled him on spikes. A quick evil Superman story, but it was in service of an amazing Batman story. Number 9. Lex Luthor Superman. Okay, this evil Superman isn't technically Superman, but when Superman and Doomsday are both killed by each other, Earth Prime's Lex Luthor returns to Earth after getting bored of being the new Darkseid on Apocalypse, and learns of Superman's demise. Lex Luthor, with the help of a superpowered armor, steps in and makes himself the new Superman. I mean, not really Lex, but sure, we'll just give this one to you. Now, he had some good intentions, but it's Lex Luthor. He wasn't exactly the best person for the job. After having multiple falling outs with the new real Superman, pre-Flashpoint Clark Kent, he gave up the title of Superman and started acting as an independent hero, and sometimes a villain. Number 8. Parallax Superman. In this story, Parallax, the physical embodiment of fear, took over the body of Kal-El, making him submit to Laxi by torturing children, and uses this Kryptonian's powers to confront Sinestro, who traps the cocky super entity and teleports him to the caves of Quard, where Sinestro tries to take Parallax out of Superman's body for his own evil plans. But surprise! Parallax has already escaped Superman's body, and a battle ensues between Sinestro and Parallax, leading to the surface of Quard. Superman escapes from the caves and, in a last-ditch attempt to defeat the entity, steals Sinestro's power ring and coerces Parallax to swallow his super butt whole. Superman is a clever guy though. He traps Parallax inside the power ring and the day is saved. Gosh, a lot of plot twists there. Number 7. Hank Henshaw. Hanky Boy here was already a villain of Superman's from past stories, but when Superman was killed by Doomsday, Hank, unable to directly get revenge against Superman himself, decided to attack his reputation instead. Come on, man. He's already dead. Not cool, dude. Not cool. After creating a Kryptonian cyborg body using the birthing matrix, he took on the guise of Supes and went about destroying Superman's memorial plaque. Then he saved the president to get clout so the president would recognize him as the real Superman. Eventually, he and Mongol destroyed Coast City, and the real reborn Superman, with the help of others, defeated and discredited him. At least he looked really cool. Number 6. Overman. Now this version of our favorite red and blue man didn't end up in Kansas when he was ejected from Krypton. No. This Kal-El found himself in Sudetenland, Germany in 1938 and was acquired by a certain mustached fascist. With Kal and Kryptonian tech, the Reich were obviously able to win World War II and rule over the entire planet. Later, Overman would become disgusted with the stashed man when the Holocaust had been finalized, although he still served the state. It's kind of a weird set of morals there, dude. Eventually, he was cloned and received a love in the form of Overgirl, but after her death, he was completely heartbroken, and he supplied information to the freedom fighters who long opposed the fascists, which eventually led to the death of the new Reichman, the Nazi Justice League, and the city of Metropolis. With the grief of all these losses holding him down, he was overthrown by his friend. Damn. Kinda hard to feel bad for him though.
Number 5. Red Sun Superman. Superman Red Sun was released in 2003 from the mind of Mark Millar, part of the Elseworlds imprint, and we ask, what if Superman had been raised in the Soviet Union? I just watched Black Widow, we saw like a Russian Captain America, great stuff, now we're talking about Russian Superman. That's why we're here, folks, let's do it. The ship lands on a Ukrainian collective farm instead of Texas, and this idea had been floating around in Millar's mind since he was a 6-year-old. Back when he read Superman issue 300, it showed the USA and the USSR rushing to claim the fallen Super Sun when he landed in neutral waters. Now, Mark Millar always wondered what it would be like if the other guys ended up getting to him first, an idea that subsequently earned Millar an Eisner Award nomination in 2004 for Best Limited Series, so you must check it out. Number 4. Superman Parallax. In Superman Volume 4, Issue 29, written by Keith Champagne, we see Superman on the search for missing children from Metropolis, but when Superman follows a lead, he's greeted from fear himself at an abandoned hospital. Parallax and Superman fight it out, but realizing he has no other choice, Superman offers himself up to the Dark Force. The only being that can save Earth at this point after is Sinestro, a powerful alternate, perhaps one of the scariest. You be the judge. Number 3. Lara Lane Kent Supergirl. This next version of Supes looks a lot like the version that we're going to get in the new Flash movie, so I had to throw her in there to get the gears spinning a bit. She's the daughter of Superman and Lois Lane. She appeared for the first time in Injustice Gods Among Us Year 3 storyline. Now, in Zack Snyder's Justice League, we learn that Lois Lane is indeed pregnant, and the following sequels would have shown us a world without Lois. So perhaps this Flash film will show us this bright alternate world where Batman has killed the Joker and Supergirl grows up with both of her parents' guidance. She looks pretty badass too. Now, these are just set photos, but the similarities are wild. To see for yourself, check out Injustice Year 3, starting with issue 6 or 7. I think she comes in around there. Number 2. Superboy Prime. This version of Superman has more powers and less weaknesses. I'm talking immunity to kryptonite and magic. He first appeared in DC Comics Presents issue 87, where Kal-El landed on Earth and was discovered by Jerry and Naomi Kent while they were on a hike in the New England seacoast town. They named him Clark, although Clark Kent was the name of a popular comic book hero, Superman. So yeah, he already existed on this Earth Prime. Now, Clark grew up and later attended a costume beach party, which I gotta say, tights plus sand, really? It's not the best idea, I don't know. They went to get a glimpse of Halley's Comet by the beach, it sounds great. Clark even dressed up like Superboy, although he was being teased. And then all of a sudden a tidal wave hits, a portal opens, and the Superman pops out from another dimension. Now at the same time, Clark's powers manifested and he quickly learned what to do with them in the moment. Superboy followed that Superman back into the portal to his reality. Unbeknownst to him though, he would never come back. That is until he decides to later punch reality apart. Number 1, Superman Prime. Superman of the 853rd century. He's literally a living extension of the sun at this point in time, so we gotta finish with him. He left Earth way back in the late 21st century once everybody he cared about passed away. Okay, he's like, oh, she's dead? Peace. What about the millions of others you could help? I don't know. There's other people. Meet other people. Go on Hinge. I don't know. He traveled beyond space and time after that, literally reaching heaven and hell, and he made his first appearance in DC 1 Million issue 4. So after soaking up the sun for 15,000 years straight, Superman obtained new abilities. He's more powerful than the gravitational pull of a collapsing star, and is many, many times faster than the speed of light. He's so powerful that he has some energy to spare. One of those new abilities is to share his power with others. A small amount, but still, that's far beyond any other metahuman at that point ever. You thought Superman was godlike before. This guy can literally smell you across the universe. And that's not even a joke. It's called superhuman olfaction. It's a real thing. He can smell trouble across black holes. Number 10, Lex L. We'll kick off part 2 with an Elseworld story. This comes from Superman issue 230. Appropriately taking place on Earth 230 as well, we see Lex Luthor as the Man of Steel. Lex L was born on Krypton in this reality, only his father was an absolute nightmare to live with. He was insane, so they both left their doomed homeworld and they both landed on Earth. Now when they crashed on Earth, they just happened to cause the deaths of these two bank robbers, Jonathan and Martha Kent. So Lana's adopted brother was actually Clark Kent, so the two ended up hating each other down the road. You know, we love opposites, a nice fun play on opposites, but I feel bad for Lex L because he's bald. He has to wear a wig in his normal life. Whereas Clark Kent in normal continuity just has to put on glasses and then he blends in. This dude has to wear, he must go through so many wigs. Those things are not cheap, no way. Number 9, Bizarro Superman. First appearing in Superboy issue 68. Bizarro was created, as you would guess, from a duplicating ray, hence the similarities, but only he's a Frankenstein clone. He has the opposite intentions. He can breathe fire and shoot ice out of his eyes, so it's a fun opposite. The new 52 version of Bizarro was created when Lex Luthor tried to clone Superman, and instead of waiting 10 years for the project to be complete, Lex released him only after 5, so in turn he had this pale, still shredded though, but slow version of Superman. Now the second Bizarro clone, making its first appearance with DCU Rebirth issue 1, ended up teaming up with Red Hood and Artemis, but the OG version is still my favorite. Even the way he spoke, everything would be the opposite of what he wants. It was so fun. So in the words of Bizarro, don't give this video a thumbs up and certainly do not subscribe if you haven't already. Number 8, Harvey Dent. Taking a dive into Tangent Comics, this Earth 9 Supes is a telepathic and telekinetic guy who uses a golden staff. I'm already a fan. Harvey's story began after he fell off the tallest building on Earth. When he stood up with only a few scratches, it was clear that his new abilities finally arrived. Dubbed the Superman, Harvey was capable of anything he put his mind to. The reason he got those abilities goes way back to the 70s when Nightwing was trying to create more superhumans. They used this experimental accelerant called the Miraclo solution, which is a catchy name, gotta admit, and then he dosed an entire town in South Carolina. Harvey was the only survivor, and after teaming up with the Flash and Atom, down the road Harvey decided to remake the Miraclo solution and give it to his fiancée Lola. Rumor has it she didn't survive, but she did, and she also received powers. Number 7, Karkgan the Mighty. Instead of landing in America, what if Kal-El landed in the darkest jungles of Africa? Coming from Superboy issue 183, Karkgan was raised by gorillas. Tarzan with laser vision. What a treat. Now he realizes he's different from the others after he learns how to fly. I guess the whole being a human thing didn't tip him off, but that's great. But this guy rocks. He's not smashing through buildings, fighting General Zod. No, this time he's saving hundreds of animals from floods. Guy grabs an elephant by its ears and just flies away. What a champ. I'm also a fan of Karkgan's super suit. The one strap though looks a bit annoying. I wouldn't know which side to put it on. I would never be too sure. He could totally wear this super suit upside down if he wanted to. Just saying. Number 6, Subject 1. Coming from the Flashpoint universe, Subject 1 had a different landing spot instead of Smallville. Kal-El crashed down here in Metropolis, of course killing random civilians because, you know, the ship landing in the middle of a city. So the government takes custody of him, and that's when Project Superman begins. He was used as a weapon. Subject 0, of course, also exists, starts secretly training the boy, and then Subject 2, Crypto, sacrifices its life attacking the Luthors. It's pretty dark, all these test subjects locked away in a lab their whole life. But in Flashpoint Volume 2, Issue 2, Batman, the Flash, and Cyborg come to break the Subject 1 out. And on his way out, the power source containing Subject 0 in the Phantom Zone was destroyed, so he was now free. We love a happy ending. In a timeline that's been ripped apart, that is.
Halfway through into number 5, Red Sun Superman. The Russian hero known as Superman is an alternate version of the hero we know now, from an alternate reality in which baby Kal-El landed not in Smallville but rather in Soviet Russia, where he was raised by the government. This Superman, while still a hero to to Russia, is antithetical to the United States and has defeated some American heroes such as the Green Lantern. His arch nemesis though is still Lex Luthor, who at this point is a scientist employed by the US government to create heroes like Superman. Luthor's copied version of Superman, however, proves a failure and endangers more lives. Bizarro. Luthor created many monsters to battle Superman, but they all didn't really do anything. This version is just scary because, like, it's what every American fears. Communism. And honestly, with some of the other characters on this list and what they did to the human race, on this earth, I'm surprised that Russia hasn't used Superman to just destroy everything. Like, whatever. However, this story is a good lesson about who you keep in your life and how people around you affect who you turn out to be. So, there's that, at least. And at 4, Reverse Flashpoint Superman. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse 1 Flashpoint, we see a world where Barry died when trying to get his speed back with Thomas Wayne after creating Flashpoint. This leads to Reverse Flash claiming to be the Flash and then trying to get the war with the Atlanteans and Amazons to stop by threatening them. Obviously, this doesn't work out so well, so in an effort to save himself, Reverse Flash races through time, changing the events to create the world exactly how he wants it, with Barry not being able to stop him, which involves saving not only Bruce Wayne, but Martha and Thomas Wayne as well, resulting in a world without a Batman. On the final page of the issue, we see Eobard with all the new heroes he ended up creating and convincing them to join him, as we can tell by the Reverse Flash symbols on their suits. Even Green Lanterns and Wonder Woman has one. This page also has a Superman, and honestly, sick suit, but being controlled, or I guess led by the Reverse Flash, makes this utterly horrifying to think about, especially when you can see the other members of the Flash family racing behind Reverse Flash. He finally got what he wanted. Eobard Thawne became the Flash. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Ultraman. A member of the crime syndicate, an evil version of the Justice League that terrorized its Earth, that being Earth 3, Ultraman is basically the opposite to Superman. His real name, well, his real human name, is Clark Luthor, and is the adopted son of Lionel Luthor from Earth 2. Ultraman is Kal-El, with 2 L's, who comes from a version of Krypton whose people are mean-spirited and selfish. Unlike other incarnations, they gain power when exposed to green kryptonite. Just before his Krypton was destroyed, Kal-El's parents, Jor-El and Lara, sent him to Earth 3 to one day seek vengeance against the being that destroyed Krypton, teaching him to become the strongest being on the planet or to become nothing at all. Upon his arrival on Earth 3, the young Kal-El coerced a couple of young alcoholic substance addicts, Johnny and Martha Kent, to adopt him, only to murder them years later once he no longer needed them. He went on to found the crime syndicate and take over the world. This guy is a homicidal, violent megalomaniac with mommy and daddy issues. However, he's definitely a character I want to see on the big screen. Please. Penultimately, and at number 2, Overman. Overman is an alternate version of Superman from a different world in the multiverse, obviously, but unlike other versions of Superman, his primary language is German. This is because on this Earth, the German soldiers won World War II, to speak around the YouTube censors, eventually taking over the planet and spreading German everywhere, as in like the language. Another Overman first appeared in Grant Morrison's Animal Man number 23. He is one among several pre-crisis characters that were returned to reality by the Psycho Pirate's Medusa mask. This Overman comes from an Earth based around the grim and gritty stories of the 1980s, and the heroes of this universe were actually a part of an experiment created by the government. Overman... This has got to be one of the most ridiculous points that I saw, but Overman went mad and destructive after contracting an STD. Not even kidding. And the other inhabitants of this Earth were a black and muscular Wonder Woman, an unnamed Flash, and a punk-style Green Lantern. Psycho Pirate pointed out how ridiculous this universe is, but I mean, come on, it's still pretty terrifying. And Overgirl was ruthless on Crisis on Earth X, okay? Finally, and at number 1, Injustice. Injustice is probably one of the most popular alternate Earth stories of this generation. Thanks to the Mortal Kombat-inspired fighting game by the same name, this is an Earth where Joker managed to trick Superman into thinking that he was fighting Doomsday when he was actually killing his wife Lois Lane. That was already bad enough since we know how Superman gets in other worlds when his wife dies. However, this time she was also carrying his unborn child, which he only found out after accidentally killing her. This sent Superman into a fit of rage and caused him to kill the Joker while Batman was intimidating him, much to Batman's dismay. This one action caused Superman to go absolutely berserk and to do the one thing that Batman and everyone else feared, use his power and become the governor of the world. Through this regime, Superman killed anyone who committed a crime, resulting in Batman leading a resistance of other superheroes, not all of whom made it. While the story in the video games remains largely the same of that of the comics it generated, there are a few differences like the amount of deaths in the comics, since none of them are really playable characters, so losing them won't really affect your gameplay experience. Either way, the scariest version of Superman we've seen today, although almost tied with the one who was using guns.
Number 10. The New Red and Blue. Superman 162 was an imaginary tale where Superman splits himself into two parts to be more productive. Superman Red and Superman Blue. They were great. They both did a bang up job fixing up cities, saving the day. The love triangle that was happening in Superman comics was also fixed. Superman Blue married Lana, Superman Red married Lois. They did a joint wedding. It was all smiles. And then way later in 1998, we got to see another version of this story play out, only it wasn't as fun and carefree. Here, Superman lost some of his solar powers and instead developed energy-based ones. In order to contain said energy, Supes needed a new blue and white suit. Those new powers allowed for Superman to sense radioactivity, electricity, magnetic forces, and then he would absorb a lot of this power at the same time. When Cyborg Superman teamed up with Toyman, he split the new Supes into two and his personality was also separated. Blue Superman wanted to think things through, come up with a plan, whereas Red Superman, well, he was literally red hot. He wanted to take action. Both of these guys ended up loving Lois Lane, so there's no split wedding this time around. In fact, Lois got so sick of both of them, she kicked them out. Imagine saying no to two Supermen, you're like, no and no. Not you guys, get out of here. The guys then decided to have a race, because that's what mattered at that point. Sure. You know what does matter though? If you click those thumbs up. Yeah, those likes go a long way for the studio, and if you're not already subscribed, take off your jacket, stay a while. It's nice here, I promise. Number 9. Super Santa. He sees you when you're sleeping, and he has a quadruple barrel Gatling gun. How lovely. This 1995 Elseworld story puts Superman in a post-apocalyptic future where he has to go toe-to-toe with these crazy, mutated army of Batmen. The world is much darker than the one we know now. I mean, literally, these nuclear fallouts have left Superman without his UV rays. Good old lack of sunlight. No tans for you. So he hits the gym, updates his naughty list, and when the crazy gang called the DNA Dictators, with a K instead of a C, rob Bruce Wayne's grave and make a monster Batman, only one man can save us all. Super Santa. Number 8. Super Soldier. Coming from the Amalgam universe, first appearing in Marvel vs. DC issue 3, fans in the 90s got to see these two comic book powerhouses join forces, making these lovely mashups of characters from each universe, origin stories interconnected. It's a great time. In this story, Clark had no pre-existing powers until the Super Soldier Serum came along. We're seeing the two worlds already collide. He had pretty much won the war single-handedly back in 1942 after this, but then he came along Ultra Metello, this massive evil robot sent in, of course, by Lex Luthor. That's when Super Soldier sacrificed his life taking down the villain, and it wasn't until 50 years later that the JLA found his frozen body. But even then, 50 years later, Lex Luthor was still alive. He was keeping it young with some handy-dandy green K meteorite. That must be what Jennifer Aniston uses. Super Soldier ended up taking down Ultra Metello, and in turn, Lex was arrested. We love happy endings. No beards or Gatling guns this time around. We're on the right track. Number 7. Boxer Superman. I feel like nowadays it's all about celebrity boxing matches. Every other weekend it's someone fighting Lil Baby or whatever, one Logan Paul brother is fighting a robot. This next one might be a thing that actually happens, who knows anymore. Coming from Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams back in 1978, part of the all-new Collector's Edition, basically this alien named Ratlar, who is part of a species known as the Scrub, visits Earth and demands that we pick our best fighter to go against theirs. Rattler woke up and chose violence. Okay, cool. So they picked their scrapper, and it of course was the ever so fearsome behemoth Hunya. Alright, great. Now if we refuse this after-school space fight, the Scrub will destroy our planet. So Muhammad Ali argues that since Superman technically isn't from Earth, he must be the one instead who fights. Guy's literally a champ. And he's absolutely correct, he has a point. Ratlar is actually amused by this, so he thinks, you know what, instead, why don't you both just fight each other? That ought to be entertaining, right? The fight is set to take place on Bodace, which is orbiting a red star, so it's actually a fair boxing match at this point. No powers for Clark. So Muhammad Ali trains Superman to become a professional boxer in just a few months' time. The fight is then broadcasted intergalactically, millions tune in, pay-per-view probably charged so much for the match, and then Superman gets beat by Muhammad Ali. How amazing is this? Not only that, Ali continues to take on the behemoth as well, knocking him down in the 4th round. He's the greatest in all of the cosmos, or as Muhammad Ali says, they're both the greatest. Okay, so sweet. Number 6, Super Ant-Man. Not from the Amalgam universe, but dangerously close to it. From Action Comics issue 296, called The Invasion of Ants, we see Superman rocking a different but nice look. So at first we see him and he's on the side of a building with an ant mask, head on, and he's asking for other giant ants to follow him, even making buzz noises to furthermore convince the ants. Okay, what the hell's going on here? Well, after a colony of giant ants were mutated from a nuclear war on another planet, they decided to come check out Earth, as if we didn't have enough ants already. So Superman comes by to save the day, and he figures out that if he uses red kryptonite radiation, he can give himself an ant's head and then communicate with them. If this one isn't considered weird, well, maybe the next one will get you. Number 5, Black Zero. We look now at an alternate version of Superboy from a hyper time stream where the Superman had not returned, and instead the clone kept aging. Now he made his first appearance in the Kingdom issue 2. He stuck around so his Kryptonian powers were fully developed on top of the telekinesis that he already had. Kon-El began his days as a hero, but people looked up to him obviously for a bit until, he started going crazy and then nobody wanted to follow him. He was much different than the other guy, the normal Superman. He couldn't save the day as flawlessly, and eventually he just changed his name to Black Zero, which is a comforting nickname. So he had no association with Superman at this time, and then in Superboy Volume 4, Issue 64, it was a full-on Superman war. That rhymed, nice. Black Zero created a bunch of clones after that and was under the impression that humans would never leave a clone alone, so his solution was to just conquer his Earth. Metron of the New Gods soon contacted him and offered him more worlds via Hypertime, worlds that also had this clone mentality problem, whatever. Now these Superboys that he fought would lose and then end up in a stasis chamber. He was killing it. Now eventually he was beaten by the combined powers of other versions, with main continuity Superboy leading the pack. Number 4, Superman Earth 31. In Batman The Dark Knight Returns issue 3, we meet Earth 31's dark take on the Man of Steel. This comic inspired Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice because when Batman comes back to fight crime, he goes a little too hard with it. His methods are definitely messy. So Superman is sent in to stop the Caped Crusader. Now this Superman is a little less happy-go-lucky like some others on this list. Him and Lois have gotten divorced. He works for the corrupt US government, so they have a say on who he fights now and what he does. Some of Frank Miller's finest work, honestly, if you ask me. This is the same story that introduced Carrie Kelly as the new Robin. A must read. A little better than Dawn of Justice, just a little better. Number 3, Centaur Superman. Superman Wonder Woman Whom Gods Destroy was an Elseworlds imprint released in 1996. It's a 4-part miniseries that shows us a world where the Germans won World War II, and Bruce Wayne is also the president, and Harpy's working for Cersei kidnapped Lana Lang. What a time! So Clark and Lois fly over to Europe to find her. They book a flight, but during that flight, Harpies come back and the plane goes down over Germany. The goddess Athena turns Lois into Wonder Woman, and then she goes toe-to-toe with Diana, Wonder Woman, who at the time was working on the German side. And then as for Clark, after the crash, Cersei turns him into this crazy centaur. At this point, it has Shrek 2 vibes all over. It's just this mighty stallion on top of a hill with all the ladies below, centaur ladies below, just racing to greet him. They're like, who is this handsome man? And then they all just raid towns and party with their hooves and their good times. Honestly, it's a great time for Superman here, but for everybody else, it's just a nightmare. Number 2, Supergirl. Making her first appearance as Lois Lane Superwoman back in 1943 in Action Comics issue 60, Supergirl has appeared in DC Comics for the first time a few times, actually quite longer than you think. The first time was a dream sequence. DC was testing the waters out at this point. So Lois ends up getting hit by a car. She's hospitalized, and then she dreams that she received a blood transfusion from Superman and in turn got his powers as well. A pretty fun dream considering you were slammed by a car moments earlier. Could be worse. So in this dream, she was Superwoman and had her own costume, the whole thing, and then in Superman issue 123, Jimmy Olsen uses a magical relic to wish Supergirl into existence. DC was trying out the Supergirl idea in a way that wouldn't impact the comics. So in that same comic, she sacrificed her life saving Clark, and then Jimmy wished her out of existence to fix the timeline. Instead of wishing to, I don't know, heal her. Here's an idea. Number 1, Super Sister. In Superboy issue 78, Superboy straight up finds a space woman entering Earth's atmosphere in like a UFO, and then he makes fun of her driving in his head. That's his first thought. Now unfortunately, that space woman was Charla, a telepath, and she's now upset at his inner monologue before she even gets out of her craft. But then out loud, he doesn't defend himself either. Like, he actually makes it worse. He's like, oh, if women run your world the way you run spaceships, I'm glad I don't live there. Like, dude, he's so angry for literally no reason. So Charla turns him into a girl and then leaves. So he starts going by Claire Kent at this point, and then he hangs out with Lana as Clark's sister. That's what he tells everyone. Now the dialogue alone, I mean, this is an old comic, mind you, but Superboy is like, oh man, I have to do girl stuff like cook? He's watching the boys play baseball outside. He's like, oh, if only I could do baseball instead. Damn 1960s stereotypes. He gets changed back at the end after he learns his lesson or whatever, but again, it turns out to be a dream. It's like the writers were too afraid to even go that far in these early comics. What a mess.